everybody, and welcome to Urban Green Live. I'm your host, John Mandyke, the CEO of Urban Green. This is a new program series where I'll be interviewing global experts to better understand how we get to a zero carbon future. And the good part is you get to participate too, because we'll have live Q&A in just a little bit. Now, today we're going to continue the discussion we started a few weeks ago on the renewable grid at our annual conference. If you missed the conference, make sure you check out our website. You can see the proceedings there in the summary. A renewable grid in New York City is now more important than ever for two reasons. First, when our Indian Point nuclear power plant closes next year, our grid will nearly be 100% fossil fuel based, emitting not only carbon, but also air quality pollutants that impact health, especially in environmental justice communities. Now, the second reason a renewable grid is important is because of our local law 97, the building carbon emissions law in New York City. That law ties the future of buildings directly to the carbon intensity of the grid. And so the discussion about how we get more renewable power to New York City is pressing and as important as ever. So today we're going to take a deep dive and explore the role of hydropower to green the grid in New York City. And we have a world-leading expert on the program today. My guest today is Sophie Brochu. She's the new CEO of Hydro-Québec, which is a top 5 hydropower producer in the world and the largest in North America. So Sophie, welcome to Urban Green Live.
John, thank you very much. I am delighted to be with you and to be virtually meeting your members. Good morning to you all.
Great, Sophie. We're so pleased that you're spending a few moments with us today from Quebec to join and talk about this important issue. So for those that don't know Hydro-Québec entirely, can you just give us a brief overview of your history and your operations?
Yes, I will do that. And if I may, John, before I want to extend our deep thoughts to you folks in New York City, I can tell you that when you were all going through those difficult pandemic times, our hearts were with you, still are. We love New York. Everybody in Quebec loves New York. And we look forward to be visiting you, and we look forward to having you in Montreal. So again, stay safe, and I'm happy to see that the city is doing better, although we have a lot of things to go through still. So Hydro-Québec, as you said, John, I just joined Hydro-Québec beginning of April. I made my career into the natural gas and electricity world. Hydro-Québec his story is quite fascinating because it was born, let's say mid 1940s, out of the will of a society that was not happy in the world it was living in. So the reality was we had a lot of electricity distribution companies, privately owned, and the electricity rates across the province were very different and were quite frankly very expensive. So the will of the government and the population at the time was to buy. They were not nationalized in the hard sense of way, they were bought. And the vision was to have one state-owned distribution company so that the electricity rates would be the same across the province, so that each region would be level out and be equal in being able to attract residents, commerce, and industries. Rapidly, there was a vision because we have a vast territories up north. There are many, many lakes, over 500,000 lakes, and almost 5,000 large rivers. So the view was to say, well, let's make hydropower the fundamental supply of electricity in Quebec, and this is how it was developed. So Hydro-Québec was based first on an economical desire to be more equal and to be more competitive. Rapidly, though, it became very clear, and it became even clearer in the last decade, that it was also an environmental benefit that was extraordinary. So over 99% of Hydro-Quebec power comes from renewable sources. And right off right off the beginning, it was also clear that we were part of an ecosystem. And I think the notion of ecosystem today is more important than ever. We see in those eras how we need to rely on one another and not necessarily going north from south. The energy needs to flow, and we need to put our infrastructures all together to make sure that we bring clean, competitive, reliable energy sources to our citizens, to people like you who are real estate developers in New York. We have a lot to do. Nobody can do it alone, so we need to pull everything that we have and make sense out of it. And actually, it's interesting because as of today, already 5% of New York State's power come from Hydro-Quebec. So the goal here is to see how we can increase that, and I think we have a lot of potential.
And how long have you been supplying that power to New York State?
Oh, it was, I would say, it was even before Quebec has been supplying for over 100 years. In New York, it was increased through the years and at the beginning of the 1980s and all that. But so we've been connected, and it's only logical. And you know, those systems, the energy systems, are capitalistic by nature. When you invest, and it's true with wind and with solar, but certainly with hydro, when we invest, those infrastructures are there for 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. So the reasoning is one of a long-term basis. And this is why the relationships are so important. And the utilities, you know, people pass, the companies remain. So the institutional relationships are extraordinarily important in our business.
Yeah, so I learned something new preparing for this episode. I didn't realize that Hydro-Quebec was a state-owned enterprise. How does that make your operations different, recognizing that your shareholder is the government and not the market?
Well, it's a very interesting thought. In North America, very few utilities were state-owned. In Europe, you had that more. I actually ran a privately owned, publicly traded entity for many years. The will of the government here is not to maximize the profit. It's it's got to be really profitable, but it's more the optimization of the profit, which to me resonates better with our type of businesses. So the optimization, and it's not to say that a privately held, publicly traded company cannot be optimizing profit either, but I would say that the long-term view here was very important. I think, and I say I think because I just joined the company, so on top of my mind, the assets of Hydro-Quebec are all located in Quebec, right? And we're thinking about nearly $80 billion. So we need to think long term. So the ability to have a shareholder who has the back and the shoulder, the financial shouldering to move forward was extremely precious. And again, at the time of the naissance of the emergence of Hydro-Quebec, the drive was economical. But certainly today, we realize the huge chance we had to be able to have right at the start a renewable energy sources. And our goal today, our thrive, our ambition as at HQ, the women and the men at HQ's ambition is to share that competitive, reliable, and clean energy sources with its neighbors. But we're not into the business of building infrastructures. We are in the business of building relationships. We are in the business of creating a network of businesses, of infrastructures, of relationships from which we can springboard to create a better future. And certainly the vision here for all of us is to go beyond what can be viewed parochial. And I'm not saying that other people's are and we're not. The temptation to be parochial is very important. And the temptation to be autarkic with renewable sources is also very important. So the idea here is not to view HQ's power as flooding a market, That's not the will, but how can we complement the bouquet of energy sources that you need to put in place to answer your own aspiration? How can we complement your own renewable energy sources? We certainly don't want to displace your energy sources. We want to complement them.
So to me, your business is fascinating because you essentially turn water into electricity.
Right.
So tell us, like, exactly how does that work? Like, give us the hydropower 101 and how you take water from a dam and get electricity powering a city on the other side.
Well, I think you said it right, and it's everybody, when you need to produce electricity needs to come from somewhere. So you actually need to manufacture the electricity. So what it means is that and electricity is what I call a noble product. And the noble product is something that that needs another energy to become electricity. So you can manufacture electricity from coal, from oil, from natural gas, from water, from sun, and from wind. So that's the base. And then you use these energies to turbine or to convert it into electricity. And then this electricity is transported through transmission line into a destination. When it comes to hydro, again, maybe just for the purpose of planting the decor, I would say that first, Quebec is a vast territory, right? And actually, our population in the whole province of Quebec is about the population of New York and its boroughs. But New York is less than 1% the space of Quebec. So Quebec is a very vast territory. The population is at the south. And it so happens that the production capacity, the hydro capacities, their big rivers, lakes and rivers are mostly up north. So the idea is you have two types of, I would say, production dams. Okay, sometimes you have that a lot in the US Northeast, like the Connecticut River, you would have many dams. So the water is turbined in many facilities as you go down the river. And so it's run of the river. But you also have reservoir dams where we actually diverted some of the water currents in the rivers into figure it a big reservoir. And this reservoir is also something very unique because it actually acts as a battery. So not only is Hydro-Quebec's power renewable and all that, but it can modulate with the demand. So we can follow the pattern of the demand and make sure that as we do, we are the most competitive for our customers possible. So the renewable energy is something that is absolutely necessary. And we must view energy again as a bouquet of means to get there. And actually for quite a while, there will be fossil fuels needed, especially on peak times, the time that we get through this. But as we develop wind, for example, and as we develop solar, which is great, and you do that upstate New York, and this is fantastic, and you need to keep doing this. But when it winds, you have electricity. When it doesn't, you don't. When we have the sun, you have electricity. When the sun is not there, you don't. So you need to complement this offer with either a battery to make it 100% achievable, or you are intermittent. And when you offer an intermittent service, theoretically it has less value than if you can do it all the time. So one of the ways to view Hydro-Québec is not only to bring clean, reliable, competitive energy renewable into your neck of the wood, but also to complement your own facilities south of our border and to be able to, let's call it backfilling your own intermittent energy sources.
So essentially what you're saying, the battery capability here is capacity.
Exactly.
And so,
Exactly, and this is
talk to me, yeah. So talk to me about your capacity. So, you know, is it dependent on the rain? You know, how does that work?
yes. Well, you have a good point. I mean, we're talking about waters, so we need to talk about water availability. So throughout the decades, we've seen the patterns of having more rain and influencing the reservoir. Actually, what we, and when I say we, the scientific data shows that the, 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 the effect, one of the effect of climate change is that in that part of the world, the water will be more abundant. It is already very abundant. And the fact that the reservoir have been created, we can go not only from one day to the other, not only from day, night, weekly, seasonally, actually we can do yearly. And we operate our reservoir with a lot of finesse in order not to overexpose our reservoir. And we always keep a very good margin of capacity on that is latent, and so that we never encounter a drought that would be. So when you run up the river, it is more delicate. When you have the capacity to have a reservoir like we had the chance, well, we don't have the same challenge. So this is why Hydro-Québec's power is viewed as very reliable, renewable, and competitive.
So hydropower is known for its carbon-free energy, but as you well know, and we've heard too, it also has its critics. The concern of Indigenous people was raised at our conference when we talked about hydropower, and we have the same questions at Urban Green about that. So how can New York City consider hydropower green if it displaces Indigenous communities? Can you talk to us about that, please?
Yeah, well, you're touching a point that is very dear to Hydro-Québec's heart, John, because and I've seen some presentation where people present ourselves like China and the Three Gorges dams. Look, let's be very clear here. None of Hydro-Québec's hydropower projects have required a population displacement or forced resettlement of local communities. None of that. Are we implemented in some of those communities up north? Yes. Just to give you a feeling, there are about over 100,000 indigenous nations in Quebec. There are a bit over 10 of them. They represent about 1% of the province population. I'm not saying that to say that they're de minimis. No, not at all, because they are very important in our history and in what we can achieve. So those are important people, but they are relatively few. True, though, absolutely right, that where we operate, their concentration of their communities, they live in 55 communities scattered throughout our territory, and they make up a greater population where we are. Now, how do we do that? We don't displace population when we arrive in a region, and obviously we have been better off over the last few decades than at the beginning of it, and I think everybody can relate to the fact that we all woke up to the reality of Indigenous people and making sure that we do the right things. So we've signed over 40 project-related agreements with those communities. And what are the types of agreements that we sign? We sign these agreements to establish beneficial partnership with the communities and the nations, and this environment, the reality of Indigenous people is extremely complex. They are very different from one region to another, from one community to another, and the whole thing is to make sure that we respect their values and their culture. And what we're trying to do very hard, and we achieve that. We're not always perfect. It's not always easy, but we are definitely building better relationship to help them actively participate in Hydro-Québec's projects. So that's the economical benefit. The other thing is that when we have a project, we don't come in and say, here is the project and how can we discuss it? We try to come upstream of those projects, sometimes many years in advance. We sit down with the Grand Chief and its council band, and we say, here is the idea. What is your reaction to it? What is your input? Now, across the world, indigenous people have suffered a great deal. And when one realized that, either at the government, either in a business, you have to recognize that there was a big suffering, and that those people carry in their heart, they've been hurt. So when they approach something, when they approach a project, they want to make sure that we do realize that we don't erase the past. And so it's a very delicate environment to work with. Like with the Cree, for example, we have historical relationships. It depends how they are organized. We have the Inus, they have their own reality, they have their own rhythm. We need to be respectful of all that. Are we perfect? Certainly not. Do we aspire to be? Absolutely yes. And I just came in, I looked at the history, I've chatted with the people. There are still a long way to go not to erase the past, but to make justice with their past. And it's not only with the corporations, but also with the governments. This is a long endeavor, but we approach it with a lot of delicatesse.
There's also the issue of methyl mercury that's been raised. And so methyl mercury is created from altering the water cycle, which can impact fish and local habitats and have an impact on the indigenous people and beyond. So how is that addressed with your operations?
Well, let me tell you, I am not a scientist, so I am not trying to elude the question, because I think it's a very factual question. I will tell you how I understand it. The reality is that when you create those reservoirs and when you do all that, yes, the mercury level increase. Hydro-Québec was actually a world leader in trying to see, when you actually do the work to implement the reservoir and through the life of a reservoir, all that, and follow over 40 years of study the impact. And we dedicated a lot of scientific work to that with people all across the world. We didn't want to be the one saying there is no issue. So the fact is, there has been no known cases of mercury intoxication from reservoir fish consumption in Quebec. So what we do know, though, is that some of the fishes have increased mercury levels, and then it comes into the knowledge of that and how do you work that out. The mercury levels in the Cree population in the James Bay region, just for a sake of example, were approximately half of Hydro-Québec's electricity generated. This is where we produce half of our electricity, are actually lower today than before we actually started the work to do the reservoir. So all this is being monitored, followed, and is not dismissed. But although there is a need to monitor, there is no again, nobody had a mercury intoxication from fish consumption over there, and there is not. I don't want to. I'm looking for my English word there. It is an issue, but it's not a problem.
So we're going to open this up to audience questions in just a bit, so make sure you submit them to Caitlin. I just have a few more before we do that. So what is the capacity potential for New York City from Hydro-Québec? I mean, how much of our power can you supply to help us turn to green?
Look, we will be delighted to be working with New York City. There is a project proposed by TDI the line is permitted, the transmission line is permitted. The transmission line is 1,000 megawatt of capacity. So our goal is to be using this line in order to serve the need of your people. I am sorry I don't have the specific data of your consumption, but I am sure 1,000 megawatt is less than what you require. And again, we would be delighted to be a bigger part of New York State supply, and certainly a significant springboard for your people to get to where you need to go with net carbon zero.
What's the role of technology in your industry, and how do you see that evolving just over the next 10 or 15 years?
Technology, well, in every space, technology is like booming, innovation is booming. And today, just talking about being able to follow the load, follow the demand. Yesterday, people had to commit for big chunks, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. Now we can modulate all that. We had the systems to do that. We had the infrastructure to do that. But now we can have this technology installed in the buildings, and you know about the domotics. We can have that infrastructure into the building to be more intelligent and sending the signal to exactly follow the load to where you're going. One of our big thing at HQ is energy efficiency. And it seems counterintuitive to say we are going to help the people we serve to consume less of what we sell. And we have this deep belief. And it seems counterintuitive maybe when you think about the bottom line of your company, but this is the right thing to do for the society in general, for both financial reasons and environmental reasons. So the technology today allows for managing system load, demand load. You are real estate developers. I'm sure you know all about it, how the extra load of one building can be used to balance the load of another type of facilities in your neck of the wood. I am convinced that if New York City was to be better linked between its own buildings, that the requirement of your own ecosystems would be less than the sum of all of your parts, and technology will be able to play a role in that. So you need to make sure that you get access to renewable energy sources, and whatever renewable it is, you want to use as less possible of it, because you have other things to do with your money than to pay an electricity bill, right? And that's the mental posture that we have. People, if they could, people would use no energy. And so there is no thrill in paying an electricity bill. And but you want to use the best energy possible, reliable, competitive, and make the most out of it. So technology will play a big role on the demand side of energy. And we've always talked too much about the production and not enough about the consumption. And the whole thing today is that people like you need to consume better. And now we're all thinking about, you know, what consumption would be. So we need to be linked intelligently.
And what about on capacity? So what is the potential of hydropower in general, or Hydro-Québec specifically, without having to build new dams? Like, you know, are you at capacity now, or, you know, is there still great opportunity and potential out there?
Okay, so let me answer that question, because it's a very interesting question, and it's one of optimization. So if you figure a graphic and you think about the evolution of demand, the evolution of power demand, unless you have a really huge industrial implementation, would follow a straight line, right? If you have increased population. Actually, the load in the residential sector and all that goes down because of energy efficiency. But let's say the movement is very linear and subtle. But at one point of time, this subtlety adds up. For example, in Quebec, we have a big endeavor to move into electric vehicles because our energy is clean, competitive, reliable, renewable, and all that. So we have a big push. This is an added demand. So at one point of time, when you bring in new large energy stock, by definition, you will have more capacity than the exact need of day one. It creates a potential, and this potential is to be valorized either in our territory, either with our neighbors. At the same time, and I want to go back to that, the energy efficiency that we can develop here in Quebec, and we've launched programs. One of the programs, among many others that we launched a couple of weeks ago, is we're going to invest at Hydro-Québec 80 million a year in energy efficiency. Our commercial customer, this is the niche of that specific product, will avoid $35 million a year of electricity bill. It will boost the economy because of equipment and suppliers and all that of $160 million. And it creates a whole portion of load that is freed up to either being exported, either being supplying to electricity. So long story short, we have capacity, we have new capacity, but we have existing dams that have been there for a long time, for example. And now we're going to invest to ensure the perennity of those dams without touching the eighth of the reservoir and nothing that, just the new modern system by itself increases capacity also. So as we move forward, we have capacity. What I can say though is that we will not be using the world anymore surpluses. A surplus is after a meal leftovers. So the energy that we have is latent energy, and it's a meal waiting to be served. And we're going to serve that additional meal to people in our territory, and we would be delighted to share that meal with you in New York City.
So you're the CEO of one of the world's largest hydropower companies. And you've only been in the job a few weeks, so maybe this is an unfair question, but what's your biggest worry?
It's not an unfair question. My worry is not a worry of being the CEO of Hydro-Québec. My worry right now, John, is given the context that we're in, the financial strain on public finances, on private finances, is such that it will be tempting to go fast to boost the economy. And I think we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here to try to solve two crises for the price of one. And we absolutely need to make sure that whenever it's possible, that the money that is invested in the mindset that we need to prevent another crisis that actually can be way worse than what we have seen. So my worry right now is to make sure that as we move forward, we create plans that not only reboost the economy, which is formidably important, but that we invest that money to do a better good for our society. That's what I am, an economist by formation, and that's what I am concerned with. I see a lot of money being invested. I want to make sure it is invested in the right way. And the line we're talking about and what you have to do in New York is certainly in that stream of thought.
So I have one more question. So for the audience, feel free to keep sending them in to Caitlin in the chat line. So Sophie, my final question is, this is a program series about a zero carbon future. So Sophie, in your opinion, how do we get to zero carbon in our society?
Zero carbon. Zero carbon is a huge challenge. Humongous. Is it doable? The answer is, I'm sorry for that. The answer is yes. we need to develop a path. Each territory wants to be as autarcic as possible energy-wise. Each territory wants to be autarcic, renewable energy-wise. So the idea here is that New York has started to build its own renewable energy sources. You need to keep doing this. It has started to revamp some of its buildings and to make sure that when possible, you use less fossil fuels. I've been working 30 years in a natural gas distribution company who developed itself into electricity, solar, wind. And I've come to the belief that as you embark into this journey, you need to understand it's a journey. And you cannot go from 100 to 0 in 5 years. But you need to be determined, and you need to be thinking about energy as a portfolio of energy. And using the right energy at the right place in the right time, just that goes a long way into moving forward the net zero. So for example, and in New York, you have a very densified natural gas distribution system, and you have a very densified electricity distribution system. Logically, you could certainly think that some of the base load used to heat buildings, let's say with natural gas, should be moving to electricity, while in the peak times, it might be very sensible, intelligent, more efficient to use that natural gas system to serve the peak. Because if you were to electrify everything, it would probably be a mistake. Electrification is not an end, it's a mean, it's a super mean. But again, it needs to be manufactured. So I want to come back to that because in that spirit, the approach of Hydro-Québec is not to flood New York and say we're going to be the solution for you all. No, not at all. You need to develop your own, but as you will be mainly intermittent with wind and solar, view us as a backstopper. I think you want to develop as much as you can. Those sources are intermittent. You cannot rely on intermittent. And actually, if you look what happened in Germany, they started to do a lot of wind, and they added wind, they added energy, right? Not capacity, they added energy systems. And at one point they realized nothing was balanced. So they went back, and they actually went back with coal-based plant supply. Bad example. We don't want to get into that. So view Hydro-Québec as an enabler of your own energy, renewable energy development, where we can backfill when needed your own renewables. So as we work together with complementary sources, from a supply standpoint, we can work and walk toward a net zero future. But we actually absolutely have to work on demand, and energy efficiency needs to be put in place. There is no reason that a water heater in a condo, in a house during the day keeps heating the water. Why do we do that? Why do we keep heating the water while we're away? We don't need that. So we need to have the systems that say when nobody is in the house, the water heater will be turned down for 2-3 hours. It will free up that capacity. It will come back before the people come back, and people will not even notice. So it's we've put a lot of emphasis on production over the last few years, or over the last decades, forever actually. And now we're starting to see, okay, we actually need to work on the demand. So there is a lot of work to do. New York has everything to be the showcase of a success, of intelligence, of how you can do that, because you have all the pieces. And again, we'd love to partner with you. We don't pretend to be the solution, but we can be a good chunk of your springboard.
Great. With that, Caitlin, let's open it up to audience questions.
Sounds good. The first question we have here is from Danielle. It's a two-part question. The first part is, does hydropower currently supplied by Hydro-Québec qualify for Tier 1 renewable energy credits under New York State's current clean energy standard? And then the second part of the question is, would hydropower supplied to New York City from Hydro-Québec through the Champlain Power Hudson Express line qualify for either Tier 1 renewable energy credits or potentially for NYSERDA's newly proposed Tier 4 energy credits for renewable energy that directly sinks into New York City?
Okay, well, Danielle, thank you for your question. This is a very specific question and very detailed one. I certainly do not pretend to understand everything you're talking about, but I do know that right now we have very productive conversations in order to have people in New York and in other states to understand exactly what kind of environmental attributes we are bringing to the table, and it will be up to the constituencies in your state to determine the value of the environmental attributes of our product.
Yeah, and I think just a little bit more color on that is the essence of the question is the view on hydropower from these projects is evolving to be one that moves in a direction that would qualify more than qualify less. And that's an active ongoing issue that we see going right now with our Public Service Commission.
Great. I think you answered this briefly earlier, but how much does weather affect electrical capacity and production?
Well, weather. Let's call it water inflows. As you can imagine, the scientific community across the world, and especially in Quebec and within Hydro-Québec, has been following the patterns for many years. The tendency that we see, and it remains to be, we'll know in 20, 30, 40 years, but the tendency that we see is that we have more and more water as we see climate change. And again, the way for Hydro-Québec to make sure that we never come any close to issues of reliability with the people that we serve, we keep a very high margin, which again comes back, John, to your point. We could stretch ourselves to make more profit, but we don't, because we want to make sure that we will, because the reliability, at the end of the day, reliability is king or queen. I don't know. I don't know what I should say. Probably queen. No, I'm just a joke. But reliability is so important. And actually, it is more important than renewable, because if you are renewable completely but not reliable, it won't work. So renewable and reliable are extremely important, and we cherish this in everything we do, in all the plans that we do. And again, we have a lot of capacity to move through the years. We don't manage the reservoir on a daily basis, although we do, but we manage the reservoir through years of life cycle. But the tendency that seems to present itself is to have more water than this. It so happens this way.
Great. The next question we have is from Sohrab. Is the Champlain Hudson line also permitted on the Canadian side of the border?
No, we are going through this process right now. We are confident that we will cross the line. We need to do it intelligently, with fairness and all that. But we have actually started the work, and we are embarking into this. Let me put it this way: I wouldn't have this conversation if I didn't get the feeling that that would be taken care of.
Great. This question is from Adam. What is the biggest obstacle standing in the way of getting Quebec's hydropower to New York City?
The biggest challenge, right? I think it's frankly speaking, is it's for the people to organize and gather consumption. because the line is in the US is permitted, is that to make sure that, and it's a matter of timing. These are long lead decision, but at one point somebody needs to make a decision. And please understand my comments here not to be threatening in any way, but if for any example the demand does not materialize, if you not gather the demand, the meal to be served will be served somewhere. It is our will, our hope, our dream to serve it to you. So I think that you know, events like today makes it understandable that, okay, let's do it. If we want to do it, how do we do it? How do we regroup? How do we sign? How do we have the grid moving forward? So it's been in the topics for a long time. I think the pandemic was kind of putting us on hold. Let's go back to the table, work it out, and we're all ready for that. So actually, it's more of, okay, let's make it happen.
Great. This question is from Annie. Hydro-Québec is a monopoly. Will Hydro-Québec allow for reciprocity and access to the Quebec market by New York electricity producers?
It is already the case.
Great. This is from Jameson. How do you deal with hydroelectricity's negative reputation generally? Habitat destruction, displacement of people, altered hydrology, etc.
Well, I think I've covered that. There is a lot of myth over there. Again, displacement of people. We never displaced people. Never. No community whatsoever. I'll tell you something that I am a deep believer in. Having had the career I had and being where I am today, I am convinced that the industry's players have often the wrong approach to the needs and the requirements of our society. And the wrong approach is that we want to protect our energy files against whatever. We view other energy files as competitive. And I am of the contrary opinion. So oftentimes people who don't agree with hydroelectricity are protecting their file, are protecting their fossil fuels file. And people attack hydro, and some of the concerns are very legitimate, and we need to answer them. But again, the myth of displacing people, the myth of inundation and all that is exactly that, a myth. And a long time ago, I had the privilege. I was 27, so 30 years ago. I had a few friends at Consolidated Edison in New York, and Consolidated Edison had a commercial relationship with Hydro-Québec. And at that time, I was at the natural gas distribution company, and we had started to do a partnership altogether. Long story short, Hydro-Québec offered the people at Con Ed to fly out and to visit the big reservoir. So I flew with them. I was not at Hydro-Québec, I was for a natural gas distribution company. And I was with Con Ed, who did both natural gas and power. And as we walked and approached the reservoir, you know what the people do? We are in silence. You are in silence because you see how it's made. You see what is implied. You see the vastness, and you say, this is the power of a whole region, not only of Hydro-Québec. And it actually feels great to be a human being by that reservoir. And as a Quebecer, we are very proud of having put this together. Again, were we perfect? No. Are we way better today than we were? Absolutely. And I invite all the energy files to not view themselves as competitors, but as a supplier in a bouquet, and the bouquet is not us to decide, it's to the customers, it's to people who are within Urban Green to decide. And I think it will be a bouquet for a long, long time. But if any of us wants to have and keep 100% of the bouquet, it's not the companies who will suffer, it's the people, it's the customers, it's the society, and then we will have collectively failed. So I invite everybody who carry myth to reason in a very broad sense and not in the competitive jugular share market way. Am I naive? Maybe, but I certainly believe it's the best way to serve the society we are responsible for.
Thank you. This next question is from Richard. I think you answered the first part already. Does Hydro-Quebec's power capacity match its dam capacity? And then the second half is, or is there today significant dam capacity to which generation could be added?
Kellen, you just spoke a little bit too fast on my poor English, so I didn't get the second part of the question.
No problem. I said, is there today significant dam capacity to which generation could be added?
Oh yes, I mean the potential, the latent potential of dam capacity can be increased, and one day will. But again, if you reason it from a whole system perspective, the traditional way of a utility was to build infrastructure, build, and then increase rate base and make more money. This is not the way we reason the company. The way we're reasoning is work on the demand side, complement with other renewable energy sources. We're building a solar project on the south shore of Montreal. Will we increase the height of some reservoir through time? Absolutely. So we have a lot of means and tools at our disposal to supply our market and supply our neighbors. The ability to increase is there. But again, we have to be sensible and making sure that we do it in the least cost perspective, not only on a short-term basis, but on a long-term basis. Because the goal here with climate change, the big challenge is not to decarbonize. The big challenge is to decarbonize at the least cost possible. And that is where the challenge is. This is where brain power needs to come in. And this is where working everybody together to budge base load with peak loads among the files as we move forward. And I think there is plenty of way to look at it, and we are comfortable in Quebec with our ability to move through times.
Great. The next question is, what are the new jobs and or skills needed for workers in the Canadian power generation sector?
We need all the skills. I think I would say that the traditional skills, what I personally call the old hands experience, is still so very important. But there is no doubt also that at the other end of the spectrum, innovation capacity is formidably important. Hydro-Québec has innovated a lot through the years, and we have a research center at Hydro-Québec. We invest. We do not spend. We invest 100 million a year into research. So, and it takes a lot of faith to do that. Many research centers across North America just disappeared. But investing in the research allow us to think about the future. So we have invested a lot over the last few years, over the last decades in the battery sector. We are investing a lot right now with hydrogen that will be able to be injected in natural gas network to be blended and be fungible and renewable. And one day you'll take hydrogen, CO2, you will merge the two, you will have a perfectly renewable hydrogen if you use a renewable electricity to do it. So I think all the traditional skills are exactly there again, but innovations, thought process, And again, thinking as much within the walls of the customer than within the walls of a dam is the way for us to think about the future. So it takes that ability. And I would also say that for a utility today, whatever you do, you need to have soft skills. And we need to have engineers who can build bridges between two over a river, but you need to have people who have the skill to build bridges between the people. And those soft skills are equally as important. And we need anthropologists, we need historians, we need to understand the indigenous communities' requirement. So it's just, we need to move away from a strictly engineer perspective, which is very important, to more of a societal skill set. And societal includes engineer and hard stuff. So it's a fascinating time. Hydro-Québec is intriguing from the outside. When you get in, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Great. And then this is going to be our last question here. The energy sector has a largely male demographic. As the HQ's first female CEO, do you see substantially more opportunities for women, people of color, Indigenous people more now than in the past? And what changes are you seeing moving forward?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the first thing I've made was to make sure that the people report to me, my table, my comité de direction would have more female around the table. We're not equal yet. We're 5 out of 12, but it's pretty good. It's parity zone. And we also have a lot of room to have more people from ethnodiversity, from sexual diversity, from whatever. I always say, you walk on a street, you see diversity, you get into an office, and you go, where is this office located? And we need more diversity. And John, I come back to your comment earlier on what keeps me awake at night. I would say that as we are preparing the plans for tomorrow, and as we are planning for the new norm, the new reality, and for a more resilient way of doing our business and delivering the products and the services, be it government, being home, being residents, being business, as we do that, we need to make sure that the plan makers include diversity. Because if you look, if you look at the crisis that we just went through, many of the cellule de crise, the crisis unit who managed the crisis, were led by women. And why was that? It was that because it was, contrary to 2008 and 9, this was not a financial crisis, this was a people crisis. It was a citizen crisis. It was a taxpayer crisis. It was an employer crisis. And a lot of women were put in charge of the crisis unit. Now we need to make sure that we have women and diversity in planning for the future and developing the plans. And I told my people, if you're planning a project, if you're planning for whatever future strategic plan or whatever, if the thought process, not the consultation process, if the thought process does not include the a parity of gender, then it's not a plan. It's an idea. It will be a plan when you will have diversity in creating the plan. And not again, oh, we've consulted with ABC. No, at the thought process. Then we'll be more resilient. And that's what I hope for everybody. And again, I want to say, John, how much I appreciate the opportunity to come to your virtual meeting. We all in Quebec, we wish you health and safety. And again, from Hydro-Québec, the women and men of Hydro-Québec, we will be delighted to be part of your energy bouquet and creating those long-term relationships.
Well, Sophie, thank you. I want to thank my guest, Sophie Brochu, who is the CEO of Hydro-Québec, for this really informative discussion and this window into hydropower that we hope was informative for everybody. So Sophie, thank you so much for spending time with Urban Green today and our stakeholders. Today's program is a great example of the work that we do at Urban Green. We take on the biggest challenges with the biggest solutions to make the biggest impact. And we do that through our 4 key activities. We convene, we research, we advocate, and we educate. Check out our website at urbangreencouncil.org to learn more about how we do all of those to make a more sustainable future.